Hello, and welcome to another episode of Coffee with Chuck. I am very excited to have Kenya Cox joining us today. Kenya is the Executive Director of the Kansas African American Affairs Commission, and she is also one of the newest members of the JAG-K Board of Directors. So she's my boss, or at least one of them. So we're very pleased to have her. Kenya, thank you for joining us. And just to start off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into your current position with the advisor or with the African American Affairs Commission?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Chuck, for giving me the opportunity to have coffee with Chuck this afternoon, although I'm having water.
That's okay.
Well, so, one of the funny things, or at least I find it funny, my family tells me all the time that I'm not a good joke teller, but what I think, I like to tell people that I'm a born again Kansan. I wasn't born in Kansas. I'm a military brat. My father spent 20 years in the Air Force, and so we traveled all over the country and we lived abroad. But my mother, she's from Kansas, and whenever we were in the United States, we spent every summer, half of our summer here in Kansas, and then the other half of our summer in Alabama. That's where my father is from. So I always looked forward to my time in Kansas with my grandparents and my cousins. So, I really have adopted Kansas as my home.
I think Kansas adopted you as well, because you not only live in Kansas, you've been very active in Kansas. So, and I don't recall when you kind of settled your roots here, but can you tell us a little bit about your community involvement also? And then at some point, I would like to go back and have you tell us, like growing up, some of the challenges you had on your career path and how you were able to overcome some of those. So I know that's a lot to throw at you, but if you could talk a little bit about those things.
Okay. Well, let me see. What was your first question?
Well, the first question was, the first question was, and this is really still kind of part of your introduction to our audience. You've been very active in the community. So you said you adopted Kansas, but you not only adopted Kansas, you came here to be a part of the community. You weren't just living here. You want to make Kansas better. And so I was just curious, as kind of way of introducing yourself, what you've been involved in and kind of how it got you to where you are.
Okay. Well, that just kind of, we can pick right back up where I was sharing about my father and my military roots. We grew up and my father had a philosophy, and I don't know if this is something that all military families, or if this is a military philosophy, or if it was just something that my father believed in. But my father really strongly influenced us to believe that it was God first, then your country, and then your family. And, I just kind of embraced that wholeheartedly. And I didn't really even think much about it until I got older. And so, I don't know, we were having a conversation. And so I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, because I was a brilliant, teenager. And I'm like, Dad, you have it wrong. It's God first, and then your family, and then your country. And my father said something that was pretty profound to me later on, after I learned a lot about history and some of the other things. And he said, no, he said, I believe it's God first, and then your country, and then your family. Because if things are right in your country, I can keep things and keep my country strong, keep my country free, that gives my family the best chance, the best opportunity to survive and to be prosperous. And so that's a lot of my passion and my mission, is to do my part to assure that I'm doing all that I can to make sure that we are building the more perfect union. So I have a profound love for Kansas and a profound love for our country.
So along the way, as you started up, you said you were a military brat. I believe you used the word brat. If not, I
I
apologize
did.
for it. Okay. Um, so you moved around a lot, and then you settled in Kansas. But tell us, in moving around a lot, I'm sure you met a lot of different people. Uh, and because you're moving a lot, there's a lot of change in your life. Can you tell us like how you adapted to the different environments? What kind of challenges did you face, whether it was because of the mobility or just different communities, and how you were able to overcome some of those challenges? And it sounds like you obviously had a lot of support from your family too, but can you share with us maybe some stories?
Mhm. Absolutely. Definitely had a lot of support from my family, but one of the things that I learned early on is that if I wanted to have a friend, I had to be able to show myself friendly. The one thing that I believe that military children have in common is that we really learn to adapt to our surroundings and our situation. I never knew who would be my neighbor. Someone may be my neighbor today, and that family would move, and someone else would come in. And so I just really learned to um, develop the type of friendships that was just based on sometimes proximity to who we were close to, but also it allowed me to pivot and just not have a lot of the barriers that sometime that we have, or um, when we've been confined to one area, one community, one racial demographic. Sometimes that limits you or causes you to be a little bit more, I will say, and I want to just use some generalizations, maybe a little narrow sometimes in your scope, but that experience caused me to, I had friends from every racial background that you could possibly think of, different religions. And the one thing that I probably, two things that I think about often is that, especially when you live overseas, the one common thing that we all shared was that we went to a military school and we were all Americans, and that was kind of like our common base. We were all Americans. And the other thing that I was thinking about, what was the influence? And even now I get real choked up, but every day, no matter where you are or what you're doing, if you're on a military base at 5 o'clock, you pull the national anthem plays, you pull over and you stop. And as a kid, I can even remember we would be outside playing and the 5 o'clock, everything just stopped, and you would, and I think about that. So every time I hear the national anthem, even now, it just takes me back to my childhood and just that reverence again for your country. And so anyway, yes, so having the diverse background, opportunity to be friends, I think really has helped me a lot in life, as I've moved forward as an adult. Um, I found it. I haven't felt uncomfortable with being the only female or the only African American, because I found myself in a lot of situations where I would be the only. I haven't found a real challenge with getting to know people that maybe they don't share my same philosophy on life. Actually, I enjoy hearing, some of their stories or their perspectives and sharing my perspective. And so military life, I believe, really afforded me to be a more welcoming person. At least I like to think of myself as welcoming.
What about, so this past summer, obviously a lot of unrest in our country. And I know even some of our JAG-K students were questioning how good America is or great America is because of some of the injustices that have occurred. What would you say to those students who say America isn't great? What would your response be? And of course, that's their opinion from their perspective. So we're not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just
Right.
asking, like, from your perspective, what would you share with them if they said that?
Well, I can go back again to talking about my father, and I mentioned how later in life, and I realized that my father went into the military at a time when there was great social unrest in this country. He grew up in a small town in Alabama, and I didn't find out until later on a lot of the challenges and discrimination that he encountered growing up. And it really amazed me at that point when I realized that he made a decision to go and to serve and protect a democracy that he himself was not fully allowed to enjoy all of the rights and the privileges that our Constitution guaranteed. And that again fuels me to do what I can on my part to make it better. Do I think that we have some ground to cover? Absolutely. This is February. It's Black History Month. And, it's an opportunity for us to look at and talk about the contributions that people of African descent have, the way that they have contributed to making America what America is today, or the accomplishments. And you asked me about maybe a childhood memory or some of my thoughts or experience. And I can remember we had just moved to a new base. My parents, we had just got our all of our household goods. So we were unpacking, and my parents were like, go outside, kind of wanted us to get off from under their feet so that they could get us settled. Go outside and play. So we went outside and met some kids, had a great time. We built a snowman and tried to build an igloo. And I mean, we just had a great time. Came on in, and my dad, he asked, hey, did you meet some kids? Did you have fun? You make some friends? And, I said, yeah, we had a great time. And I was telling him about the igloo and everything. And almost as an afterthought, I was heading up the steps, and I said, and oh yeah, I said, they told us that there's some new colored kids in the neighborhood and not to play with the colored kids. And my father was like, you are the colored kids. And, my father, he thought that's one of the stories that my family, how you have your little family stories. But my father thought that was a funny story, and he would tell that over and over again at, different events. You are the colored kids. And I was shocked. And I can remember, I really remember the story again, because my father told that story a lot. But I remembered, what I remembered about that is that at that moment, I was really perplexed about the fact that, well, if I'm the colored kid and my friends, my new friends that, I just spent hours playing with, and they were warning me like, this is something really bad, don't do this. And I was in agreement with them because I didn't know who the colored kids were. And obviously they didn't know who the colored kids were. And, what it made me question them, what is bad or what is wrong with being colored? And fast forward, what I understand now, and I believe, is that those kids, they had no idea what they were saying, or even they had no idea. Somebody told them that. And I really believe that racism is something that is learned. It is something that is taught. And if it's taught, if it's something that is learned, then it could be unlearned. And I believe that how we really approach that is through the whole history component. You can't tell the story of America without telling the story of Africans in America. And when we don't tell the full story of all of the contributions that women, the different minorities, Native Americans, Hispanics, that all of us have contributed to making America what America is today, then we do a disservice to all of us, because we allow some folks to feel that they're superior. And then we have other people that feel they're inferior, and both are an error. I've been told, or have a religious philosophy that says that the truth shall set you free. And so I believe that if the truth sets us free, then it's a lie that keeps us bound. And so when we don't know the contributions that all of our ancestors have, and the roles and the contributions that they have, and the way that they've contributed to making America what America is, then that fuels a lot of the racism and that we are encountering even today. When we talk about the fact that, African Americans, every war that this country has ever fought, from the very beginning, the Revolutionary War, African Americans fought side by side, were patriots. The first person to die was an African American man, Crispus Attucks, and it wasn't like he was just, walking across the street and just, caught a bullet. This was a person, an individual that was really committed to independence and the freedom. And when we see George Washington, that portrait of George Washington sailing across the Delaware, and in that portrait, there are two African-American patriots that were a part of the, fighting right there alongside. So all of those stories are so very important. And that's why Black history is so critical, and why I am really a strong advocate for not just Black history, but really pushing forward to say that Black history is American history and should be taught comprehensively and chronologically when it occurred, not as an addendum. When we're studying the Revolutionary War, we need to learn and understand about all of the contributions that African Americans made to this country. When we're learning the different things about the Industrial Revolution and the different things, one of my family's historical legacy is the railroad. My family was very involved in the building of the railroad, and as were many Asian families. And so, you know, you think about where America would be if we hadn't been able to build the railroad. And so, again, all of these things are so very important. And when we look at Kansas history, that's where I get so excited about Kansas history. Kansas has such a beautiful history. When you know, we often talk about like the Brown versus the Board of Education, and that story in itself is something that is remarkable. But the story before that, for as it relates to me, sorry, as it relates to Kansas families before the 1954 case, in 1881, Kansas families, African-American families, challenged the school board in Ottawa, Kansas. 1891, 1803, from 1881 through 1949, we had 12 cases where Kansas families challenged the separate but equal, where they were really fighting for the basic, to believe that, you know, an education was a right, that they wanted the best for their children. They wanted them to have access to a good education, and they were willing to fight for that. Now, that takes a lot of courage, and that's something that I believe when we tell those stories, that is an American story of courage and the fight for equality and justice and bravery, and to challenge, you know, those that are in authority. 1881. Those are stories that I want to see us talking about. And I think that we could really celebrate in a shared collective story about who we are as American and Kansans.
And you did mention this.
That was a long answer to a short question.
But a great answer. And you obviously mentioned Black History Month, and I certainly agree that history should be taught chronologically, and those significant developments throughout history. But we do celebrate Black History in February. So what are we doing in Kansas, or maybe some of the national activities? Are there things that our students can participate in virtually, since we're still dealing with the pandemic? Or are there some things that we couldn't do this year that we normally would during this month? And maybe even like last month, January, celebrating Dr. King's birthday, there's normally a march. I don't know that happened this year because of COVID. What are some of the things that we could do this month, especially to maybe learn about some of these stories that you were talking about, or others? And then can you tell us a little bit more about what the African American Affairs Commission does?
Absolutely. So January, you mentioned Dr. Martin Luther King holiday celebration that, you know, nationally, Martin Luther King holiday, really for me, it really starts the year off. And one of the things that our commission has done, we have been tasked or have the responsibility every year of helping to put together the governor's celebration. And so there's usually a march, and we have a keynote speaker. And a few years ago, our commissioners really thought that, you know what, we ought to utilize this as an opportunity to kind of set the tone, to give a clarion call for the upcoming year. And so we will look at some of the historical quotes that have been attributed to Dr. King, and we'll develop a theme, and we kind of utilize that as like our marching orders for the coming year. Well, this year we settled upon the theme. Dr. King's last book was "Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community?" And we actually decided on this pretty early in the year, before a lot of the developments that really happened. But it was such a great theme for us to really begin the conversation. We just finished one of the most contentious election cycles on record. We are dealing with the pandemic and all of those challenges. Where do we go from here? Talking about the social unrest, all of those different things. Where do we? Is it our choice? We have a choice. What can we do? And so we started that with our theme, and we had this year the renowned, he's a professor and he's a film director. He's written several screenplays. He is just phenomenal, Mr. Kevin Wilmot. And he is quite a challenging. His new movie that is out, that was in conjunction with Spike Lee, was called The Five Bloods, and he's actually looking at the Vietnam War and some of the challenge and the social unrest that was going on in our nation. He had another movie that he collaborated with Spike Lee called The Black Klansman. And he really issued some real challenges for us to say, this is a time for courageous leadership. This is a time for us to really look inwardly to say, am I really doing all that I can to be a part of the solution? What role am I playing, or even, to keeping things in the status quo? It really helped us. We wanted to set the tone. One thing that was so exciting, normally that event happens in the Capitol. We start off with a ceremonial march around the Capitol, then we come in, the governor issues the proclamation. We hear some comments from our African-American legislators. We hear, from our keynote speaker. But this year, because of COVID, we couldn't do those things. And we decided, should we just cancel? And that was some of the conversation early on for safety. But then we decided that, we would utilize the virtual medium, and everything is we taped it, and it's all online. Usually we have about maybe 200, 250 people that attend the event. So far, we have had, the last time I checked, it was over 700 views and individuals that, and I know that not only in Kansas, because my sister who's in Atlanta and a niece that is in Connecticut, I have family members outside of Kansas that have had the opportunity to view that. And so what we are realizing is that with great challenge comes great opportunity. And now we can reach more people than we ever could before. And we see this as an opportunity to really share with people a lot of the work, the good work that is going on in Kansas. The Volunteer Commission will be in 2021, they will have a 5-part series, diversity and inclusion webinar series that anyone could go through and take that training, learn get an opportunity to increase their capacity to think about the racial divide, to think about maybe some of the biases that we all bring and learn to be better and to do better, we wouldn't have had that opportunity to share that as broadly as we did with the MLK, because we got an opportunity to share that information and invite individuals to be a part of that. So we start off with the MLK, and then from that, February is historically an opportunity where we do our African American Legislative Day at the Capitol, where we invite African Americans from all across the state to come to interact with their legislators, to learn more about the legislative process. We usually have speakers who talk about current legislation that the Kansas legislators are looking at, or bills that they're proposing. They get a chance to go in and look firsthand at the proceedings of the day, and then we have given them information on how to go in and talk with their legislators about issues and concerns that they may feel that the people that represent them need to know, that this is my concern, or this is how I feel about that issue. And so we see that as an empowerment day. So what we are looking at this year is not just a day, but through the whole month of February, we're looking at an opportunity to share information about some of the legislative goals and objectives. And we've called our virtual series called Finding Our Way Forward. We'll have an opportunity to hear from members of the Governor's Commission on Racial Equity and Justice Report. We'll have individuals from there. We'll have a policing and law enforcement panel. We'll have legislators and community advocates and some specialists talking about the suspended driver's license bill. Judge Karen Arnold Berger, she is the Chief Judge of the Kansas Court of Appeals, and she'll be talking about the bail bond cash system that we have in Kansas, and looking at that. One of the big issues that we'll have a panel discussion about is maternal and infant mortality in Kansas. And we'll be hearing from some subject matter experts on that subject. The great opportunity will be a one-on-one with our African American Legislative Caucus members. This will be an opportunity for them to share some of the legislation that they are proposing this legislative session. They'll be able to share with individuals some things that they can do to engage more actively in the process. And then they will be able to hear from the community. I think this is really, I know that this is very important because in many instances, just everyday common citizens, you're going to work every day, you're trying to take care of the kids, and you're doing all the things. It's hard to stay up on all of this. Now we have an opportunity where if you're not available on this specific day, you can tune in over your lunch hour. You can have an interactive opportunity to ask a question. And then even if you can't do it over your lunch, later on, you can go back and view that. So that's going to be really good. And then having an opportunity to hear some real time, again, from our the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, KDHE, on the COVID testing and vaccination, which is really just some real critical information that the community needs. And then some of the pressing issues like the Crown Act, which is some legislation that was proposed last year that talks about protective hairstyles in the workplace, in how we discrimination that individuals encounter, Medicaid expansion, which is a real hot topic and sometimes controversial topic, and then some fun things like art that touches the heart. This is a kind of a fun thing because usually during the Capitol, we have African-American artists from all across the state. They have displays in the rotunda where you can go through and look and see some of their inspirational art pieces. Well, this year we're going to have an opportunity to have a dialogue with some national renowned Black artists and a young aspiring African-American artist, and then Miss Janice Thacker, who has been an educator. She does a program for a number of years called Art That Touches the Heart, where they recognize young high school artists, and she's worked, it's been primarily in the Sedgwick County area, but the last 2 years, she's really worked very hard, and along with the African American Commission, to reach out to other communities, and Topeka was really a part of the celebration and awards last year. Our chair, Dr. Burl New, who is an educator with 259 in Topeka, she was really instrumental in helping to move forward with getting the Topeka students involved in this effort. So those are just some of the things. One of the big thing that we're working on, and that'll be more towards March, but we're looking at forming an African American literacy coalition. That is so important because we really want to do all that we can to inspire a lifelong love of reading for underserved Kansas children from birth to 8 years old, really understanding that children first learn to read and then they read to learn. But if they don't learn to read, then they can never move forward with the reading to learn. And kind of let me maybe make that a little bit more clear. So when children enter in kindergarten, statistics show that African-American children and Caucasian children, they come in about the same level, testing at the same level. Where we see a big difference is about the 3rd grade. And that's when the education focus really moves from learning to read, and you start to read, you start to read to learn. So if you've never learned to read, then you start to have all of the challenges in learning because you can't read. And so reading is very fundamental, and we have to do everything that we can to strengthen those beginning fundamental blocks of reading. And so working on that. And the African American Affairs Commission, we have 7 commissioners who represent all 4 congressional districts and both political parties. We cannot have more than 4 of one political party on our board. So we have to work, because if we're going to get anything done, we really have to work across the political divide. Our charge is advancing African Americans in Kansas. What's really great about our commissioners also is that they made a decision, and I can only speak for my time on the commission. Our previous chair, Commissioner Love, I remember one of the things that he said to me coming in as the executive director. He said, "We respect everybody's ideology and their political stance, but when we come to the meeting, you leave that outside of the door. You come in here, and what we need to be focusing on is, again, advancing African Americans in the state of Kansas. And so let's talk about what can we do to improve the student outcomes. What should we be doing to help Black businesses in Kansas? How can we better engage with the state agencies to make sure that information is being disseminated out? Those are the things that the commission looks at. How can we help more African Americans be nominated to boards and commissions to make sure that we have that diversity sitting in those seats, those decision-making seats? Those are the charges of the African American Commission. So we have a big charge, but a great wealth of experience and support and knowledge to execute that job.
What is the website, or how can folks get to some of these February events you talked about that will be online? Is there, just go to the website, or?
The best way is really through Facebook, because that's where we do the most interactive. We try to do more real time, but we do have our Kansas African American Affairs Commission website, and it's really KAAAC, so KAAAC.ks.gov. And we have we call it a news brief, where I try to get information out about events or legislation or critical information, like we talked about that infant and maternal mortality, rate in Kansas. And we've been working with KDHE for over a year and a half. And so we send out did you knows that directly talk about this issue and important information that that we believe that is important for people in our community to know. So we send those out, and then also when there are opportunities to serve on those boards and commissions, we send that kind of information out. The great work that and JAG that I love about your organization is encouraging our young students, our young people, to be actively engaged, community service, understanding their role and responsibility as it relates to civics, seeing them come. Last year, they volunteered and they actually helped us put together that governor's MLK event. They showed up to help us set up. They were there and were able to hear our speaker, who at last year's event was the secretary over our Department of Administration. She is phenomenal, Dr. Burns Wallace, and she just really spoke about some of her challenges that she had gone through and how she overcame that, and now has one of the most important positions in the state. And so those young people were right there. To see them be at the governor's State of the Union address. Again, they are able to actively be engaged. We invited them to come to the KAAAC office, the Kansas African American Affairs Office. We had a real robust activity around the census. I was able to share with them information about the importance of the census, why the census was important to them. They were able to help us put together some packets to get out to the community. We work with them. They helped me to set up some informationals at the basketball games. That was fun, but it was also a learning opportunity for them. And those are some of the things that really makes my job enjoyable. Seeing the young people and having the opportunity. We have a young intern that's serving with us from Washburn University, and we're working on a project learning about, well, actually, we found out that we have in the state of Kansas 5 waterways, creeks that are named Negro Creek. And that was quite interesting that we had creeks named Negro Creek. And we started researching to find out how they got these names, just some of the historical information related to it. And then what a community could do if they decided that they didn't feel like that name was affirmative or something that they wanted to be representative of their community. And so she was working and has been working with me to research a lot of the historical information connected. And some of the historical information predates even Kansas becoming a state. And it was very challenging and traumatic, some of the stories. She had no idea about this, and even some of the American history that we began to talk about. And she is a junior at Washburn University. So being able to work with her, help her to better understand the legislative process and then some of these challenges, and then what we can do if we don't agree, how we can work the process. And that's the one thing that's very important to me with our young people, to understand that there is a process for change and we can be a part of that process. We can show up at those school board meetings. We can show up at those city council meetings. We can encourage civic engagement by encouraging our community members to vote, and having our young people, even though they can't vote, they can begin to do things like doing registration drives, even participating in those. And so those are things that JAG Kansas does that I love, our commissioners love, and why they're so supportive of that program.
Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll see you in some of our classrooms at a future date.
Absolutely. And let's remember and celebrate that Black history is American history and should be taught comprehensively and chronologically. So thank you.